Beloved, welcome back to the shop. Are you familiar with the 5 stages of grief? I personally have been going through the 5 stages of grief probably for the last decade or so. About the time I became aware of the red pill. Now, the red pill, if you don't know, is a reference to the original movie Matrix, where the character Neo was given a choice between a blue pill and a red pill. Morpheus tells him, you take the blue pill, you'll forget you even had this conversation. You won't know the truth, what's really going on. We'll put you right back into the matrix just like you always were, and you can just live out your miserable life and following what you're told to do, not asking too many questions, and this is an option for you. Or you can take the red pill and you can receive the knowledge of good and evil. I mean, it's very similar. It's very much like the original conflict between the adversary, the serpent in the tree in the Garden of Eden, and God's warning. And ultimately their decision to disobey or to not trust God and to seek this knowledge of good and evil. Right? That's where we're going with the red pill. What dawned on me during this conversation, I was having a conversation with my sister this morning about it, was how this becoming aware of it and taking the red pill, the first red pill 10 years ago, has brought me through these 5 stages of grief, which I'm on the tail end of now. And I think some of these might sound familiar to you. You might even find yourself in them. The very first stage is denial. Now, denial is when you start waking up to things are not maybe as they seem. Maybe the good guys are not necessarily the good guys. Maybe what I've been told in history is not correct. Maybe my politicians and my banks and my state and federal institutions, maybe they aren't looking out for what's best for the people. No, that couldn't possibly be true. You will deny that. That, of course, that's conspiracy theory. That's craziness. Of course, it's always been this way. We've always been told this way. How could it possibly be another? Well, a lot of people never get it out of denial. Narrow be the way and few be that find it, is what the good book tells us. There's going to be a small percentage of people that are able to think through this and to get through it and to thrive on the other side. Once you find that you're out of the denial stage and you realize, yes, things are not as they seem, and there is definitely a problem, you're going to enter into the anger phase. Now, that's the phase that is all over the internet right now. You have people that have woken up, especially as Americans, as they look around and they see their city in decay, they see the ineptitude of their local and state, federal governments, their military, their law enforcement, and then you start looking for someone to blame. The politicians. Maybe it's the race wars. It's white against black. It's male against female. It's nationalists against Republicans or Democrats. Whatever. It doesn't make any difference. Maybe it's single mothers. I went through a phase like, it's the single mothers. If we could just get that problem solved, then we wouldn't have jails full of all these men. We wouldn't have all these people these men that don't know how to act and don't know how to thrive because they didn't have a father in the house. It's easy to point the blame at someone, but that's not going to get you through it. There's always going to be someone to blame, but that's nothing more than just a consequence for the big picture. Once you get through the anger stage, then you get into the bargaining, okay? Well, how am I going to make life work in this environment? I'll just go get 2 jobs, or I'll run for office, or I'll just vote harder for this politician. If I could just double down, and I can just switch some things around. Maybe we just need 1 car. Maybe we'll downsize to a different house. It's this bargaining idea that, no, we'll get back to the way it was. We just are going to need to make some changes. Well, that's not going to get you through it either, because there's no amount of changes. There's no amount of second jobs. There's no amount of downsizing that is going to get things back to the way that they were. Once you get through the bargaining stage, then you get into what I would call the depression stage of hopelessness. You see that your institutions are failing. You see that your local and federal government is not only do they not care about you, but they're actively working to destroy you, to lift up others and put you down. and they're putting roadblocks and hindrances and making things difficult, and they're actively interfering with your ability to thrive and to prosper and to live this American dream that we've all been sold. A lot of people don't get out of the depression stage. And that's when you can just say, what's the point? And you'll see that all over the internet as well. I'm not even going to work anymore. I'm not going to do anything. What's the point? They're just taking it all in taxes. What's the point? This person here crossed the border illegally and has been given a $10,000 debit card and a cell phone and free health care, and I can't even cover my copay. You could get into the depression stage of it and then completely and never succeed. And just everything that you see is negative and bad, and you will destroy your life, and you will destroy your relationships, and you'll destroy your health. Thinking negatively, thinking always hating and being miserable and finding fault, that will destroy your health. That will destroy your vitality, and you'll take your gray head down to the grave. You can will yourself to die. You can will yourself to be sick and disease-ridden just by concentrating and fixing on the negative all the time. And then the final stage, and the one that I finally, after a decade, have found my way into, is the acceptance stage. That's when you're able to objectively survey your environment, politics, media, culture, your living situation, your family, friend, relationships. You can survey that, you can accept it for what it is, and make the decision, how do I exist in this environment? Because you're not going to change it. These ideas, if you're a boomer or you're Gen X, that we're going to get back to the 80s and to the 90s if we could just vote harder, if we could just just get another job, if we could just get our guy in the office here, that ship has sailed. We are declining, and the younger generation that will be making policy and will be making decisions for us are coming into power right now, and they see the world very, very different than you do. Now, is there any point of pointing fingers? Do we blame the boomers? Do we blame the millennials, Gen X? Is that going to get us anywhere? Is it going to change anything? Because this is the muck that we're in. This is the world that we're living in. So the sooner you accept that everything is going to change, the sooner that we can get on. Now, this notion that we're going through cycles, and just like in the 80s, there were high interest rates, and then 2008, a lot of us lost our shirt then, and then we understand these cycles, and we're just thinking, well, we're just in another one, and then it'll ebb and flow, and we'll eventually get back in, and we'll be down to the 2 and 3% interest rates, and we'll buy a house then. I think that way of thinking, that understanding is, I think that it's the future is going to be unique. That you ask anyone that has traditionally been able to forecast, I don't care if it's insurance, if it's finance people, forecast things in the future or have really intelligent or detailed models of how to navigate, without telling the future what's going to happen. All those things are broken. Anyone that you've talked to, even people with 30, 40, 50 years into industries like banking and investment are telling you, we don't have any idea. I talk to people, what do you do with your money? Who knows? All of the rules and all the things that have always applied in the past are gone and over. And with the mass increase of quantum computing and technology, there's many of you that are listening to this right now that are very good at your careers or vocations. They're not going to exist inside of 4 or 5 years, maybe even 12 to 24 months. You're going to be having to retrain and do something completely different. I mean, that's the difference. So the acceptance stage is where you want to get, where you're able to remove emotion, regardless of your think-sos or your traditions or how you were raised. And I'm not saying that you should compromise on integrity or the golden rule or being honest and following the commandments of God. I'm not asking anyone to compromise. What I'm asking is to accept that this is the reality that we live in and get to work trying to thrive and to work in that environment. I hate to say this to you, this is my opinion, and I could be wrong, but I believe this to be true, that the situation where you're at right now, the decisions that you made for work and housing and careers is where you're going to be. Now, there are going to be exceptions. If you're an extraordinary person or have a special gift, or you invent something, or you're an entrepreneur that can build up a business, or you have the ability to make big, huge globs of money where you can live outside of everyone else. I'm not talking to you, I'm talking to everyone else, to regular folk. If you're getting paid a salary, if you're a wage worker, where you're at now in housing and lands, the decisions that you've made in the last 3-4 years ago is most likely where you're going to be for some time, if not for the rest of your life. And the quicker that you can accept that, the quicker that you can start doing better and thriving. The good book, I'll close with this, the good book tells us that in the last days, the final days, that Christ tells us that the love of many will wax cold. And what he meant by that was that in the end times, people are going to be less compassionate and generous towards one another. It has been very easy through the good times after post-World War II to be generous with your money, to be generous when your time, when money is flowing. It's easy to let money flow out. It's easy to be generous and to be amenable to other people's needs. But the moment you start feeling the stress yourself, financial, under threat, your job, maybe threat of losing your home, that's when you bring all those resources in. That's when you circle the wagon. And there's going to be less and less of that generosity from strangers or from shirt-tail relatives or acquaintances than we've been able to enjoy in the past. And where you're at and the relationships and the communities that you've built and made are most likely where you're going to be. I remember I've always been sympathetic to anarchy. Now, I'm not saying that I'm an anarchist, but I did sympathize with the premise of let every man pull himself up by his own bootstraps. Let him pull his own security and be responsible for his family and his food and get out of my way. I don't want any hand holding. I don't want a nanny state. I've always wanted to be, if I eat, I'll eat because I worked and I earned my keep. I never wanted a handout, and I never wanted anyone taking from me to give to someone else. If I wanted to do that on my own, that's another thing. And that sounded really good when you're sitting inside the confines of a thriving and vibrant economy when everything's going good. The grass was always greener over there. And yet here we are, right on the threshold of anarchy, where it's already happening. Maybe not to you, but in many cities right now, you can't call the cops to come if you have a home invasion. You either deal with it or you die, or you're stolen from. Sometimes the cops don't show up at all. So there are no-go zones even in this country, and that's only increasing in the rural areas. Safety nets, EBT, women's shelters, money for these things are drying up. There will be no more pensions. Pensions are going to be canceled. There was a report yesterday that a California teacher's pension was cut by 50% because they can't fund it because of bad investments. These pensions are going to be failing. Social Security, if you're counting on that for your retirement, well, you better get another plan because that's not going to be there for us either. That is completely bankrupt and gone. So we will be getting back to the thing that I always thought was so romantic, of pure anarchy, where you're going to be responsible for yourself and you alone. Now that sounded really good when I was a young man in the prime of life and surrounded by a lot of resources. My Christian church family, even though it was a cult that I grew up in, I had tremendous support. I had my dad, I had my grandfather, I could always call him. But now all that is gone. I don't have access to the church family that I grew up with. I've been excommunicated from that. I lost my father a couple years ago. Even though I didn't depend upon him, I have made my own way in life, but having that in your back of your mind, someone that you could call and you could bounce ideas off, or you could get encouragement, someone that you could call, the only person in the world that wanted you to do better than he wanted to do himself. How many people can you call that actually want you to do better than they would want for themselves? Once you lose all that, you start to realize how important the community is, and the world starts to become a lonely place. The point that I want to make and leave with you, beloved, is this. the opportunity for you to get yourself established, you and your family, in a community where you can help one another is closing. As I said, where you find yourself right now, the decisions that you've made with homes and real estates and lands and jobs are most likely, for most people, is going to be where you're at. So look into the future and see, is this even going to exist? And what am I going to do if something happens? Some of the most tragic videos I watch on TikTok or YouTube Shorts are young people that are no contact with their parents. They don't have any friends. They're living in a big city somewhere, and they're in their apartment on death's door with long COVID or a health scare or some sort of injury, and no one to even call to bring them food or a bowl of soup. Can you imagine being in an environment like that? And as society starts to get worse and worse, the helping hands that we've always been able to enjoy, those are going to dry up, and people are going to circle the wagons, as I said, and turn and focus on your own communities. It is imperative, beloved, that you get you and your family in a situation where you can start building a community, and that's going to be out of these urban areas. I really believe it. Do whatever you have to do, whatever sacrifice you have to make. This is a clarion call here. This is a final warning. Get yourself in a position where you can build that community, where it's understood that we're going to lean and rely upon one another. Because, I'm not getting any younger either. I got to face the reality of I'm not going to be able to. I'm going to need more and more help as time comes on, and I don't want to get myself in an environment where I'm all alone and I haven't gotten any community, and there's no way you can survive. There's a reason why ancient civilizations always had stone or wall or wood fortifications around their towns, because this is a dangerous, cold world. And the sooner you accept that, the better. But the most important thing, I'll leave you with this, is trust God and be grateful. Even if you didn't get into the spot you wanted, even if you missed out on a house, whatever, be grateful for what you have. And that gratitude will open doors, and it will create a connection with God. The reason why God asks us, in my opinion, he spends so much time asking us to spend time in prayer, because there's something, and I can't understand it, but whatever you fixate on, whatever you focus on, whatever is always on the top of your mind, that's what tends to manifest. That's what tends to happen. You want to do something, if you and your wife or your partner or your family is always talking about this and working and striving towards it, it's amazing how that tends to happen. Now, that can happen for bad as well. I've also seen people focus on the negative and to get in depression and to focus on illness or sickness or something like that, and you can will yourself to get sick. You can will yourself just by your stinking thinking, by your negative thinking, that can make you ill. Being a liar, being dishonest, breaking the commandments of God, not adhering to the teachings of the good word, can a life of narcissism and living for yourself and lies and hurting and harming people, that will come back on you as well. It's very important in these last days to stay focused on being grateful for what we have, accepting the world as it is, and it's changing, and that God has a better plan for us. If you were to wake up in the middle of a coma and your house was now under construction, right? You woke up and you had a perfect little cottage, right? With four warm walls and a wood stove and such. And you wake up and pretty soon, the whole roof is torn off and it's down to bare studs and there's one wall up there. You would think, oh, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. This is tragedy. Not knowing that the walls and the roof have been taken off to build something better. So this notion that what we grew up with was so good and that was what we want to get back for, and that's what we're striving to recreate, it's pointless. God is moving the world. He's moving his people. He's calling his people out of the world to do something different. And it's going to be scary. It's scary when the storm clouds are coming and you don't have the roof on your house remodel yet. When you don't know, you don't understand. But ultimately, there's going to be something that's going to be good for those people that stay faithful. But if you're stuck in anger, if you're stuck in the bargaining, if you're stuck in the depression, that's only going to hinder you. You're not going to accomplish anything. The only way to move forward, in my opinion, is to accept the world as it is and to look at it without emotion, without being angry, without pointing fingers and blame, and ask yourself, how can I survive and how can I thrive in this, and how can I be grateful for what I have? And I believe things will manifest. So may God bless you and your families. Please keep us in your prayers, and we'll see you all on the next video.